Okay, welcome everyone to Ecologies Roundtable with some really fantastic guests that we have with us today. This is a roundtable that follows our presentations this morning, our presentations and Sparkle talks that had a really extraordinary range of approaches to cuteness and ecology, whether that was through the animals that might live around nuclear power stations or Studio Ghibli's films or ideas around cuteness and propinquity. Some really fantastic talks, and these talks, which we have programmed this afternoon for you, have a similar range of thinking around science, ecology, curation and artistic practice. And we're really thrilled to have our four speakers with us, and thank you again to the Arts and Humanities Research Council for making this possible. So I'm not going to say very much more in terms of introduction, but I will introduce each speaker in turn. We'll have a chat and then we'll see what kind of questions come up. So it's my delight to first introduce Miranda Lowe, CBE, who is the Principal Curator of Crustacea at the Natural History Museum in London. And this means that lobsters, crabs, corals, and jellyfish fall under her jurisdiction of care and curation. She has written and presented on the Blaschka collection of 182 intricate glass sea creatures, which absolutely fascinates me. These sea creatures were made in the 19th century, and if you don't know them, you must look them up. Miranda is also the co-founder of Museum Detox, a network for people of colour who are working in museums, galleries, libraries, archives, and the heritage sector more broadly. And she was awarded a place on the BBC Women's Hour Power List for her contribution to her thinking around the environment and the sustainability of our planet. Over to you, Miranda. Thanks so much for joining us today.
All right, thanks, Isabel, and hello everyone this afternoon. I'm really sorry I couldn't make some of the talks earlier on, but I'm hoping there's overlap and some interesting insight from me. So the title is Cuteness Might Not Be My Weakness, and it's a spin-off from a 1990s track, anyway, by Michelle Gale, where I think she says sweetness is her weakness. I nearly said that cuteness is a weakness, but so my animals may not in some people's eyes be considered cute. So the title slide is a kind of cute Disneyfication of some of the animals that I care for behind the scenes in the museum, and applies to some of my research. So that's a and I realise it's kind of all in the eyes for my animals there, for some of them as well, to kind of make them cute, or for people to feel kind of more empathetic towards these creatures and their environments. So first off, I've done, well, since the 1990s, quite a bit of research with one of my colleagues here at the museum on mitten crabs, and I put there their mittens are fluffy. So that would then, by me using the word fluffy instead of hairy, might make them seem more cute. But they are an invasive species to the UK, and they have caused a lot of problems to our native species of crayfish, lobsters and other fish in terms of people doing fishing, angling. Because their larvae has literally come into the UK waters via commercial shipping from Asia, and they've come in the ballast water. So don't ask me any questions about ships themselves, but the ballast water that turns over essentially within the ships. And the larvae gets deposited and so on and so forth. The adults have loved it here for some considerable amount of time, and but they cause not only problems to our native animals in our lakes and rivers, but also in terms of the stability of the bank side of the River Thames. And so they literally burrow into the banks and uproot the vegetation. And as we all know, that we need trees and plants with their roots to stabilize the soil so you don't get landslides and slippages, and these animals like to burrow in there. So it's a bit of a problem. They are considered a delicacy. And I've seen them for sale outside restaurants in Shanghai and so on and so forth. And we do have some in our collection that are dressed for eating, but it's not advisable here in the UK, because if our waters are cleaner, but not clean enough in some areas, and these animals can actually carry a parasite that, if they're not prepared and cooked well, like everything else in terms of shellfish and seafood, then that parasite can give us a form of lung infection, and you start wheezing chest, a bit like if you're an asthmatic. But I would say that their eyes look very cute, and the furry claws are cute. Now, what is interesting about the fur or hairs on their claws, we've examined some of the specimens that we have behind the scenes in the collections. I mean, we don't collect them anymore. We told people to stop donating them to us because they were getting them caught on the end of their hooks instead of fish. But within that hair or fur, there are tiny animals, tiny shrimpy things that I also study, that can be, you know, a couple of millimeters, a centimeter in length. And these amphipods, they're called, and they are tiny shrimps that live in their head. And it's thought that they live in there not only for protection from larger predators, but also they too are feeding off the kind of the smaller, let's say, fragments of food that a crab might be eating as well within there. So that's one of my very cute animals. So Darwin, he had a barnacle obsession, had a issue in the 1840s. And so what you're looking at here in, actually, those are my hands holding those, they're known as Darwin's barnacles, but he actually didn't collect any of them. They're barnacle collections from people worldwide, and he studied them obsessively in the 1840s for 8 years. And in fact, he stopped doing his Origin of Man, Origin as a Species work, to concentrate on understanding barnacle reproduction, their classification. His classification is still used today in parts. And writing, he was a prolific letter writer, as most of us know, and writing to a number of European naturalists across the world that if they were collecting other things, such as birds, interestingly, can you collect some barnacles too? So within that collection, I'm still documenting this collection. So if you can imagine, from the 1840s to now, I'm trying to make this information that is sometimes written on the boards that you can see. These are stalked barnacles that you're looking at. So there's information on the boards, there's information actually written on the shells or the head end, the hard shell-like head end of the barnacles there. So Darwin has written various numbers, very codey. So I haven't unraveled the codes there yet. But on the underside, there's also snippets of his information cut out from his notebooks as well, that I'm still trying to transcribe and understand what it all means. So, but what you're also looking at is a drawer that has been reconserved to perfection as much as we can do, so that other people can handle the material. So the drawer itself has been decorked and lined with archival paper, archival boxes, so on and so forth. But there's still a way to go with people being able to access digital records to do with this material. But maybe Darwin actually thought in the 1840s that these animals were cute himself, that you would just study them obsessively. And he's even, in one of his letters, he writes along the lines that his children thought other people's dads and fathers did the same, because they would visit their friends and say, where does your father study barnacles? Because they just thought that was the norm. And he had the privilege to have the whole barnacle collection of the British Museum at the time, because that's where the natural history specimens were in the 1840s. But he had all of the material sent to Down House, so in the luxury of his living room, and he got the best microscope from Paris, that's documented as well, to study these animals. And I would say barnacles are not related, because some of them are called gooseneck barnacles. They're not related to geese at all, as the Victorians would have thought, but they are actually a relative or a cousin of crab, shrimps, and lobsters. But this has probably made barnacles seem cute, maybe, but it does not look anything like a barnacle. It's Captain Barnacle from Octonauts. And I was really surprised that a series like that would actually maybe cutify some of the animals that I work on, or bring them to light. This is, I think it's a bear. I don't watch Octonauts too much, but it's really interesting that there are other crustaceans within that children's series. So profiling the animals that I work on, and hopefully kids will feel inspired or curious to know a little bit more about barnacles, what they are, actually what they mean to the economy as well, because again, they're another crustacean invasive species that can be encrusting. You'd see them if you go on the seaside, along the pier, the wooden piers, encrusting there, or on the rocks. But also there's a problem if they're on the underside of boats and ships, encrusting there, because that then means, in terms of commercial shipping again, that it increases the drag on the ships, and then you have to use more fuel worldwide. So it's important to have a clean fishing gear, clean underside of boats and ships. So what you can see on your far right hand side, these kind of more bulbous, big looking barnacles, they're whale barnacles, a form of whale barnacles. So they are the kind of white specks that you would see on large whales in the distance, put those close up. And there's another stalked barnacle, that the most glamorous of barnacles I could get to kind of show you how pretty they can look. And I've used the word pretty and beauty as well, that I think was coming up when I was arranging this talk, rather than cute. So I realized that those are the kind of phrases I use in my world. But cuteness is not the most important thing to me when I'm studying these animals environmentally, and their habitats, and the ecosystems, how they should all exist more holistically, and why people should pay more attention to that. You know, and a lot of them are quite small animals too. And so I'm sure there was a lot of talk about charismatic megafauna as well. And we kind of joke in the invertebrate world about that gets quite a lot of attention. It gets a lot of attention in many ways, and in museum displays as well. But now with digitization, better photography, electron microscopy as well, the smaller animals can contribute to being more they can become more high profile for people to know and become curious about them. So we've got horseshoe crabs here, and actually they're not related to crabs at all. If anyone knows anything about them, they're not related to, they're not cousins of horses either. It's just a common name, but horseshoe crabs exist in a group on their own, but I would say molecularly their most closest relative are spiders. But as I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, with that kind of cartoon of the crab, I realized that if you cutify something in my invertebrate world, it does seem the eyes become more expressive. And what you may or may not know about these animals, that they're really, really important. They're really important to us as humans, but important in terms of eye research. So on the right-hand side, you see there is a close-up of an eye of a horseshoe crab that's on the top of the crab that's in the distance on the left-hand side. That is the right way up. The other one is upside down with its legs, appendages in the air. But the horseshoe crab is one of the most studied animals in the world in terms of eye research, for human sake. That eye has many lenses there, but it also has, I would say in inverted commas, other eyes, so like light receptors along that looks very menacing, sharp tail. But they're not very aggressive animals at all. They're known as a living fossil. They have eyes or light receptors around around the rim of the shell of the body as well, very tiny eye receptors. And in terms of the eye research in the 1960s, there was a professor called Frederick Bang that actually started this kind of research and study. So, for instance, they've been used to study retinoid pigmentosa, that affects the eyes in humans. And there's one other thing about the eyes, and now I can't remember. But why they have become even more extremely important to humans and science. So back in the 60s, Frederick Bang also discovered that they have hemocyanin, copper in their blood, so their blood is blue. And the chemicals in that blood have been used to develop quicker tests for diagnosis of meningitis. And also another chemical in their blood is used in the purification of tablets and drugs. So to detect endotoxins. And they have become more high profile in the last 4 years during the pandemic as well. Again, the chemicals in their blood have been used to develop more accurate and COVID vaccines for us. So, and images of this animal also won Wildlife Photographer of the Year. A kind of golden form image was the top wildlife photograph for the last round of the competition. So it has meant that this animal has become more high profile. Not as cute, but just as important. They are also only 4 species that exist in the world. 1 species in the US and the rest in Asia. And they are protected as well. They're protected species too. So it's really important to, as I said, look at everything as important as one another, and how they are important to exist in various ecosystems, and that if there's decline of one population, what impact it has on another. Now this is the kind of, well, as I say, this is more about beauty. Well, I'm sure you've been discussing about cuteness. I'm not sure how cute, not as cute as the cartoon crabs. You can get corals and coral reefs, but again, just as important. But it's actually a false coloured image. But coral reefs are the image on the left-hand side is a falsified coloured image of a coral reef, but in real life they're just as spectacular. There are lots of colors. It is a home or hotel to many other species that we may find cute. So on the far right hand side I do have a picture of a clownfish and some other fishes there in a small aquarium. That aquarium was started we were growing small corals in an aquarium in 2015 when we had our coral reefs exhibition, Secret Cities Under the Sea. And so through time-lapse filming, we were watching basically a small reef grow within this aquarium to be part of the exhibition. And the image you can see in the middle is basically what I look at every day, are unfortunately or fortunately very dead corals, very bland in colour, but there's a pink barnacle on the top there, but very important nonetheless. So not all of the material is part of the collection because of coral bleaching worldwide. A lot of it, because we can no longer collect corals in the way that the Victorians did on their expeditions and other collecting trips, but a lot of this material is from Victorian collecting. Corals are now protected under the World Wildlife Trade Act and CITES. They are listed as protected. There are a lot of marine protected areas in the world. So the importance, it raises the importance of historical collections so that scientists can come and have a look at that material and actually compare the material to a lot of the living reefs to see if they're getting the same amount of diversity. or less, or new species in areas that are being impacted by rising sea temperatures, human impact in general. And what they will be looking at are the corallites. So those are those circular kind of semi-protruding bits on the skeleton of the coral there. And when you look at those in detail down a microscope, they have different patterns, different shapes and forms, so that you can identify a coral to species. And again, I would say I've worked with fashion designers examining the corallites to inspire fashion and textiles. That is more beauty than cuteness. Nevertheless, still important. And to kind of amplify and show how important corals are and the reefs, that they're home to many species, that we are using technology, although it does say they're unusual 3D scanning. So this is a slide from about 5 years ago, when it was unusual to a 3D scan our coral collection, and that's happening more and more to unravel the mysteries of the ocean. So these are images. The central image does rotate, but it won't rotate on this slide to show you the various angles of the coral sample there. But the images are from some PhD studies of a student that came over from Australia and was looking at a time series of our specimens. So because of Victorian collecting, we have, you know, things like 80 years worth of continuous time series, baseline data about how the world's ocean was at any point in time, so that scientists, ecologists can do comparisons. But as I say, I work with, you know, fashion designers and other people in creative industries that use the collections for inspiration as well. And I get an interesting insight from them too, from the creative perspective. Right, so do we have invisible cuteness here? These are different forms of jellies, as I call them. The central image there is a compass jellyfish. It can be found in the UK. I think that was when I was doing my master's studies many years ago that I took that image. And then the two on either side, the one with the beautiful orange colouring is a siphonophore, a form of siphonophore that is considered a colonial organism, so it just has many parts to it. And then on the other side is what you might be more familiar with, is a Portuguese man-of-war jelly there. Again, some of these animals, the more dangerous, venomous, poisonous jellyfish in Australia, cubozoan jellyfish, now I can't remember the name of it, they have eyes too. There is an eternal jellyfish, Pteropsis, and that is as small as a garden pea, and that kind of regenerates forever. And I would say that looks cute. So for me, maybe the size in some of the animals that I work on, because they look perfectly formed, a semi-translucent organism that is rounded over the top, the size of a pea, but down the sides where its tentacles are, it creates a square. So that's what gives it name, a kind of box jellyfish. Maybe that's why I consider that particular animal to be cute, and maybe some might find moon jellyfish cute there. But Isabel, you mentioned the Blaschka models. So I've got some stunning images of them here. I've heard a lot of people, when they've observed the octopus glass model, they find that cute. So it's, again, whether I see beauty in it, cuteness, I think it's the more rounded shape and form, and maybe the way the glass, the texture, that kind of thing I've observed. The public, at least for the octopus, not so much for the jellyfish, seeing them cute. And it's all around sort of advertising as well, you know, how they see these animals in the media, whether you get cuddly toys made out of them as well, then you might have that thinking too. But these models, they're made entirely of glass. So the octopus on the left hand side was made in by a father and son team called Rudolf and Leopold Blaschke. You can find all this information out on the internet. But amazing craftsmen. They solely worked together. They didn't employ anybody else. And the octopus was made in 1883. And the Portuguese man of war, moon jellyfish on the other side, were made in the 1870s, I think 1876. And so these are part of the collections that I care for. There are pockets of these similar type animals made out of glass across the world globally, but they were made as teaching models to inspire people to be curious about the world's oceans, to see the animals that perhaps they couldn't go on board a ship and explore, such as some of the naturalists and scientists could do in the 1800s. So this brought the colour, shape and form to life indoors alongside the actual specimens, that when you see them in glass jars, they don't look very pretty or cute. And as I explained earlier, using new technology to give more insider information in detail. This is of that octopus, but we use it, well, that's to show the densities of glass and where the fragilities are and the wire and things internally. But we are using it to examine a lot of our whole specimens that are pickled in alcohol, as well as the dissected specimens and skeletons and skulls. And I'll just send it there. Thanks for listening with the charismatic megafauna.
Yeah, thanks so much, Miranda. Really interesting ideas there around the glass, the glass's materiality and whether that might be considered cute, and the eyes especially. I think we might talk about eyes later on. So pressing ahead, I think we'll move on to Hugh Warwick. Hugh Warwick started studying hedgehogs nearly 40 years ago. He is a spokesperson for the British Hedgehog Preservation Society, perhaps unsurprisingly, and he has written 3 books about them so far. I'm holding one in my hand here, one of the wonderful reaction books. He believes they are the cutest animal out there, and this is knowledge that he uses to run a number of environmental and ecological campaigns. I first learned about Hugh's work through his book, which is up on the shelf there, The Beauty and the Beast. And just in March, he released The Colour of the Wild, which I think you've just been reading from at Hay Literature Festival. Is that right, Hugh?
Well, not so much reading from as being inquisited on. Though, actually, if you check back to Start the Week on the BBC on Monday, you will hear me in the company of Robin Wall Kimmerer and other great people. It's been great fun.
Great. Over to you, Hugh. Thanks for joining us.
Right. Let's quickly get... Where have you gone? There we go. Cute Hedgehogs as a title. Great. Okay, so thank you so much, Izzy, for inviting me. You've managed to steal my first 2 slides, or maybe even 3 slides, which will speed things up enormously. So I might even be under time. So cute hedgehogs save the world. Maybe. I hopefully will be able to prove the point by the end of it. So yes, it was nearly 40 years ago I started studying hedgehogs. I've spent a lot of my younger years out and about picking up, cuddling, counting, and generally observing, following and bothering lovely hedgehogs. And it is something, and obviously, yes, British Hedgehog Preservation Society, fantastic organization, basically using science to further the conservation effort for this fascinating creature. And yes, 3 books about them, including A Prickly Affair, which is the only book ever to have endorsements on the cover. And the British people on this call will understand the significance of this. Endorsements on the cover from both Jeanette Winterson, one of our greatest living writers, and Anne Widdecombe, a quite hideous far-right politician. The fact that I've got the 2 of them to agree on anything, I think, shows the true power of the hedgehog to overcome everything. And obviously a book on the iconography of hedgehogs, because that was all the stuff that wasn't in the first book. And then another book about hedgehogs because they were asking me who should write it, and obviously I have to write it. If anybody happens to be massively wealthy, I have got a 4th book on hedgehogs I want to write. Drop me a line, and that'd be great. So I have spent, say, nearly 40 years involved with hedgehogs, and I'm often asked, why do you spend so much time on this one particular subject? And I point people to this. Every time there is a vote or a poll for the nation's, this is Britain's favourite nature icon, favourite wild animal, national species, the hedgehog always wins. And this really upsets my ornithological friends, the bird watchers amongst you, who may be very twitchy about these things. But the hedgehog always wins. And this is basically because people have got the idea that hedgehogs are cute. It's as simple as that. And this is why when I first heard of Izzy's work, I was so excited, because suddenly somebody was touching on a subject area which I've been involved with. I have never done anything to do with cuteness studies at all. This is purely sort of observational. So the hedgehog, it wins because people think the hedgehog is cute. And I find this absolutely fascinating, because objectively, the hedgehog is not cute. The hedgehog is secretive, it's nocturnal, it's covered in prickles which are literally pin sharp. These are modified hairs. They are notorious for being covered in fleas and in ticks, though I'm pretty sure that's a rumor spread around by the RSPB and other bird watchers just to try and discredit the hedgehog. The parasites they carry are species specific and can't infect us. They have sharp teeth with which they impale invertebrates, worms and slugs and things like that. And they have peculiar behavior patterns like self-anointing. So objectively, this prickle, I should say, I spent a couple of weeks sharing a bedroom with a hedgehog. They're also pretty smelly. So when you put all of these things together, it's hard to understand why they have picked up this charismatic sort of label. Because as you can see here, hedgehogs clearly are not cute. And in every respect, they are, okay, I admit, they are sometimes particularly adorable. But it's not always been like that. I should point out it's my son at the top with the albino hedgehog, trying an early attempt to indoctrinate him into the way of the hedgehog. He has never got beyond Sonic, which is a great shame. So I have been excited by this degree of passion people have for hedgehogs, but it is not consistent, and it is not consistent historically. If you look back through the, well, I say going through the reaction book, looking at the iconography over time, early representations of the hedgehog, certainly in Britain and in mainland Europe, have them painted as a creature of portent or of doom. This is one of the misericords in New College in Oxford, and it is one of my favorite things in Oxford. And it's a female centaur with an axe attacking hedgehogs that have got fruit attached to their spines. Now, partly, I have to say, Aristotle got a lot of stuff wrong. In particular, hedgehogs don't carry fruit on their spines, but it was a few thousand years people thought that was the case, even though nobody had ever seen it happen. But I've got hold of the history of the misericords in New College, and in this they suggest possibly that the hedgehog represents the sort of the badness of the outside, of the wild, and that the human part of the centaur is the good trying to assert itself over it. I think that's clearly nonsense. The Bible references hedgehogs purely in the way that they are a relic left behind after the destruction of Nineveh. Though, of course, that does depend on which translation of the Bible you use, and the fact that there is quite such a variance of species on offer in this part of Isaiah does make me wonder about the veracity of the translation of some of these things. If you go back through the appearance of hedgehogs in Shakespeare, then they come out as being referenced in a negative way again. And this is partly, if you look at the Celtic languages word for hedgehog, it's variations on greynog or cranog, and I'm saying them badly and saying them wrong because I can't say them correctly, which mean the ugly one. So we have known hedgehogs are a portent of doom. If a hedgehog crossed your path, you would know that something bad is going to happen. We have known that they are the ugly one. Other parts of the world, Poland still has some pretty weird views of hedgehogs. I recommend you have a look at the animation of George the Hedgehog, which I went to the premiere of in the UK. However, don't do it on your work computer. It is filthy, and certainly not a cute representation of hedgehogs. It all stops in 1905 with the publication of Beatrix Potter's tale of Mrs. Tiggywinkle. And it really is, that is the moment that the hedgehog transforms in British society, certainly. And I find that bit absolutely fascinating, that we have such a quick pivot. And from that moment onwards, the hedgehog is, at the very, very worst case, the hedgehog is considered a bit of a dim and bumbling thing. In T.H. White's The Once and Future King, the hedgehog is a very servile but benign creation, begging the badger not to eat it. I have got in the room behind me stacks, literal stacks and stacks and stacks of children's books which feature hedgehogs. They are, I think, pretty. Now, actually, my selection is obviously biased because I get sent children's books about hedgehogs. I was going to say, easily the most prominent animal in any children's book I have seen are hedgehogs, but I say that is a biased thing. They are absolutely everywhere. The hedgehog's cuteness is absolutely front and central now, and is in stark contrast to the way the hedgehog used to be perceived. So why is this so important to me? Well, I run a campaign on change.org. If you look, I think it's change.org/save our hedgehogs, which now has 1,192,000 signatures. And this is an attempt to get planning law changed. This is all part of what I'm trying to do, is all of these changes which come out of the fact that people love hedgehogs. I have a Facebook group with nearly 23,000 members on it. And I can't remember what comes next. Oh yeah, here we go. And so I argue that the hedgehog is easily the most important creature on the planet. This, I think, is probably the best cover of any magazine there ever has been. In particular, I like the fact that you see Obama and me, Desmond Tutu Speaks. I managed to marginalize two of the most important people on the planet with my claims about the hedgehog. And let me explain briefly why the hedgehog is so significant. I give hundreds and hundreds of talks, and they are frequently to audiences that are small c conservative. The Women's Institute, the Townswomen's Guild, gardening clubs, University of the Third Age. I basically have a strong preference to organizations which make good cake. And so I will travel around the country. I go and talk to these people. And I now make it part of the joke. I explain to them that they would never have invited me there to talk about macroinvertebrate population decline, about the necessity of changing our diets from meat-based to plant-based, about the importance of addressing our transport infrastructure, the national planning policy framework. My God, that's boring. And certainly nobody's going to invite me in to talk about the necessity of dismantling industrial capitalism and replacing of that with something nicer. Simply not going to happen. But what I've done, and thanks to the cuteness of the hedgehog, is develop a very robust Trojan hedgehog. I can snuffle my way into pretty much any audience and have a conversation about all those really tricky issues. And I think that's absolutely vital. That's why the cuteness of the hedgehog is so important. But there is one extra layer to this. And that is because the American writer, Stephen Jay Gould, he said that we will not fight to save what we do not love, talking about conservation. Absolutely right. And all of the wildlife and conservation groups understand this. And they try and seduce us into falling in love with the natural world using the charismatic megafauna. So Miranda, I feel your pain with this sort of thing. But it dawned on me, this is a bit like relying on A-lister celebrities to try and further illuminate your understanding of human relationships. In the end, I'm as likely to get nose to nose with, I was going to say, I've actually lost track of who are considered to be the most attractive celebrities. I really have lost track of that. So please insert in this little box, get nose to nose with, I don't know, and a humpback whale, for example. These things aren't going to happen. And in the end, if we're lucky, we'll end up falling in love with the girl or the boy next door. And the animal equivalent of that is the hedgehog. It becomes the gateway species. It becomes that stepping stone into falling in love. Because, as Stephen Jay Gould said, we will not fight to save what we do not love. And inside that comment is the admonition that if we are going to like stuff, we're going to remain half-hearted and non-committed to the truly essential fight to try and make this place a better world for all beings in it. So that is why the hedgehog is so important. And it's not magic and it's not woo. It's because the hedgehog has not got a fight or flight response. And this comes down to why I understand the hedgehog to be truly cute. It's because it manages to encapsulate vulnerability in an extremely well-defended form. Because of its bunch of prickles, it will frown when it gets nervous, bringing the prickles over its eyes and its nose. And then when it relaxes, it will be able to wander off. Obviously, it'll roll into a ball when truly frightened. But that gives us the opportunity of being close to it. And that moment of proximity is where those connections can be made. You get nose to nose with this truly amazing, wonderful wild animal, a predator bigger than 99% of animals that have ever lived on this planet. The hedgehog is wonderful, and I commend it to you. Thank you so much, Izzy, for letting me come and speak here.
Thank you, Hugh. What a brilliantly impassioned talk. I feel like that's a bit of a manifesto for the hedgehog. And lots there, like lots of wonderful turns of phrase, like the hedgehog is the girl next door or the boy next door. Lots to think about. We'll move on because of time, make sure we have time for everyone to speak and for questions later. And we'll move on to a kind of more creative, artistic way of thinking around cuteness with Rachel Maclean. So Rachel Maclean has spent the last decade working in galleries, museums, film festivals, and on television with her groundbreaking work, which works across a variety of media. So she works in video, in digital print, in VR, and in paintings. And a lot of this work references politics, fairy tales, celebrity culture. So Hugh, if you're wondering who's the most good-looking celebrity at the moment, Rachel might have a good suggestion for you. Maclean's work was showcased at Cute. This is an exhibition we'll hear more about with Claire Catterall in a moment. But I first encountered Rachel's work as a curator at the Too Cute exhibition at Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery. And it was actually the real reason that I'm here talking about cuteness today, because it was a complete eye-opener to think around cuteness seriously and across such a range of work. So Rachel, thanks so much for joining us today from, I think, your studio in Glasgow.
Yes, yeah, hello. Oh, so nice to be here. Thank you so much for the introduction, Isabel, and thank you for inviting me. Give me a moment, I'll get my PowerPoint up. No, wait a minute. Can you see that okay?
Yes, I think we're on slide 3 there.
It's okay, can you see? Okay, good.
Perfect.
Good, okay, great. Yeah, it's so nice to be here.
Sorry, Rachel, you might just want to make it like slightly bigger if that's possible.
It's full screen on my end. One sec, I'll share again.
Perfect.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's so nice to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. So I thought I'd give you a kind of whistle-stop tour of my work and my work that deals with cuteness. I've been making work that's cute for really about the last 10 years, and cute in kind of different ways for different reasons. So I'm going to kind of run through a few different works and touch upon the kind of ecological aspects of them as well. So I make work largely in digital video and digital print. In a lot of my films, I dress up as cute things. So this is my film from 2013, Germs, where I dress up as like cute personified germs, or say in my film Eyes to Me from a little bit later from 2014, where I dress up as kind of cute little girls and have these tiny little cute single-eyed teddy bear characters. I first got into the kind of aesthetic of cuteness, and I guess a kind of like saccharine feminine aesthetic really early on. It was about, I think, my like second day in art college when I brought in a pot of pink paint to a drawing class, and one of my teachers thought it was hilarious and kind of ridiculed me in front of the class for the idea that I could paint in pink. And it suddenly gave me this feeling of like, he's kind of pissed off with the idea that I'm painting in pink, or there's something about this that's like, to a certain kind of taste or to a certain kind of sensibility, he just didn't like it. There was something wrong with it. It wasn't being taken seriously. And that kind of gave me the idea that pink and this kind of aesthetic was something I was drawn to, but it was also something potentially political in it. It was something that I could do that would both kind of play with these ideas of power. So I'll keep going into the next work. In a lot of my work, so this is a work Feed Me from 2015, there is a kind of cute or a sort of saccharine initial impression that you get from it. So for example, here I'm dressed up as a little girl with kind of enlarged eyes, but I always intend for there to be some kind of slippage into a feeling of it being creepy or grotesque. So there's both something cute in the enlarged eyes, but there's something kind of visceral and disturbing about it as well. I want everything that I do to kind of have that feeling of being a little bit on the edge. In this film, similarly, there's a lot of kind of phrases that are used, such as she's wearing a necklace 110%, or the characters say things like too cute or too happy. And there's a sense that both thematically and aesthetically, there's a kind of overload. A lot is thrown at you, a lot of ideas are thrown at you. The imagery is very saturated. And I wanted to feel that on the one hand, it's cute and saccharine, but it kind of pushes beyond that point almost into its opposite. So you've got 100%, which is the kind of cute thing, and then you've got 110% when cuteness sort of tips over the edge and becomes something else. So I dressed up in this film. It's got a lot of my films deal with fairy tales. So in this work, you switch from various different genres. You go from a kind of TV game show to like an advert to almost a musical theatre number, and there's this kind of channel changing feeling to it. And in the film, I play all the characters, which is quite common to a lot of my work, and mine to audio. So I play a kind of fairy tale beast who's got a bit of a kind of Care Bear feel to him, as well as playing little girls with enlarged eyes and older people with sort of prosthetic makeup. I'll show you a short clip from this so you can get a feel for it. In the film, when you press this ball down, it says, "I'm too cute." I might just skip this forward a wee bit so it doesn't take up too much time. Give me a sec.
Watching your every move, watching you as you count the days, feeling a strange connection under protection. If you were to escape
Oh, sorry. I thought I was just making myself there.
this cell, who knows what threat we'd then be facing. Better to prevent a rogue escape than to be chasing. Keeping my eyes on you,
Feeling your eyes on me,
knowing that I can't break this case.
wishing I could be free to do anything I please.
Watching your every move,
Watching my every move,
watching you as you count the days, feeling a strange connection under protection. Under protection, under protection, under protection, under protection, under protection, under protection,
Okay. Right. So kind of off the back of some of this work I was making, I was invited by Arts Council Collection and Birmingham Museums to do a curated show. And it was a kind of cool opportunity because I was asked to basically look at the Birmingham Museums collection and the Art Council collection and kind of come up with a theme or come up with a way to kind of curate something to curate a show around. And what really interested me when I was looking, especially around the Birmingham Museums collection, it has a lot of kind of Victorian era stuff. And a lot of it was cute ostensibly, or it was meant to be cute, but it was similarly also very creepy. And I started to think about this idea of cuteness and its relationship to creepiness, and how so often objects that are intended to be cute kind of start to slip into their opposite. For example, they've got quite a big Victorian doll collection, and there's the classic kind of creepy doll trope. So it got me thinking about this idea, and also got me thinking about the fact that cuteness is not really a aesthetic category that's taken seriously for art. So often there is a lot of work in art history that is cute, but it's not often called cute. And I even got a little bit of pushback trying to put together this show on cuteness, on the idea that artists wouldn't want to show in an exhibition that was headlined or had in the title cute. So I also thought that was an interesting thing to explore and kind of push back on a little bit. So I curated a show. I'll go back to that. I curated a show with a number of different artists from the Arts Council collection. So people like Gillian Waring, Heather Phillipson, Glenn Brown, as well as more kind of historic works. So like 18th century painting, dolls, etc., from the Birmingham Museum's collection, and did so in this like very kind of saccharine painted environment. I also made a film. I'll show you a little clip from it to go alongside the show, which was almost a kind of introduction or thematic introduction to what the work was about. In the film, I give a lecture, but I'm dressed up as a kind of saccharine sort of academic Care Bear called Dr. Cute. So I'll show you a little clip from that.
The phenomenon can be explained as follows. Cute objects have a latent potential for creepiness. The word cute derives from acute, meaning an unpleasant or unwelcome phenomenon. We don't trust cute objects because they are manipulative. We just melt before them and are resentful of the power they have to weaken us.
Okay. So I'll move on a little bit to, so yeah, there's also a kind of doorway with a big mouth. I was playing, again, between this idea of something grotesque and something cute. So everything in the show had that feeling of slipping between the two. Moving on, I made another work recently, which again deals with cuteness, but in a slightly different way. So this is a work, Upside Mimi, Mimi Down, from 2021. I'll show you a little clip from this to start with too.
Mirror, mirror in my hand, who's the cutest in the land?
It's me, 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 me.
Is that me still cuter than me?
Maybe.
What must me do?
Me must chop that me in two. Ha!
Hey! Me could have hurt me!
Look at what me's done.
It wasn't me.
Well, who was it then?
So Mimi's a project that has lots of different parts to it. So it was based originally on a doll, and there is literally a doll to accompany the work that's made in multiple, which the character in the film is based off of. And the doll was inspired by a doll I had as a kid, which was like a topsy-turvy doll with Little Red Riding Hood on one side and then Granny on the other side, and you could pull a little hood over and it became the wolf as well. So I had this idea that it would be interesting to have a film and a character that had these two sides. So there's a kind of young Mimi and then there's an old Mimi on the other side. And the film is the kind of warring between these two sides of herself. The film's an animation, so unlike some of my other work like Feed Me, I'm not literally in the film, but I like acted the entire thing out, and then the film was kind of rotoscoped or based on my performance. The work was produced as a commission for Jupiter Artland, which is a sculpture park outside Edinburgh, and it's installed as a kind of fake shop in a forest. So you approach it kind of like a Hansel and Gretel style saccharine sort of candy house and follow these little almost breadcrumb-like hearts along the ground until you reach the house, until you reach the shop or the work. I made it intentionally look kind of old and decaying. I'm always kind of, every time I visit a sculpture park, I always think what would happen if people stopped tending to it and nature just sort of took over. And I was aware that no matter whatever you made in this kind of location, it would start to get dirty. So I almost wanted to kind of bring that into it as in the first instance, and then allow nature or allow the dirt to kind of accumulate naturally afterwards. So some of it's faked, but then over the course of time, my idea is that it starts to kind of overgrow and we don't remove the stuff that grows over it. The work was also installed as a literal, well, not a literal shop, it didn't sell anything, but it was also installed on the high street. So there's a kind of equivalent that we did, one in Perth in Scotland and one in Ayr. So it was set up with a kind of fake shop, which again has this feeling of like a closed down shop or the decaying high street. And then you could go into a storeroom at the back and see the film installed on a screen and a kind of like squint smartphone. I'll skip forward because I realise we don't have loads of time. It was installed between Books and Clark's, which I quite like, the kind of classic British high street. Again with Mimi, I'm playing a lot between, so I made a lot of paintings and other work off the back of it, but this idea of cuteness and the grotesque, so the kind of slippage between the two. And I made a painting series as well, which this was the painting that featured in the Somerset House Cute show. Mimi, because the doll has this kind of upside down logic, the paintings also have this upside down idea where you turn them upside down and the world inverts, or things start to look differently. So it's different. So it's got this kind of hidden image quality to it. These are from a slightly different series, but it's the same kind of logic where there's cute characters who on the one side seem sad and then on the other side are happy. So the painting can be turned upside down to allow for different meanings. And within the image, there's these kind of faces that are visible. So a smiling face and a kind of sad face, depending which way you look at it. I'll skip to the last bit. Oh yeah, let me just go a bit quicker. Another work which I deal with, maybe more specifically kind of cuteness and the relationship to animals, is a series of work from 2019 called Native Animals. This series, it was kind of shortly, well, off the back of kind of Brexit and a lot of my feelings about the United Kingdom and both the kind of reality of Britain and England, but also the fantasy of it. So the work plays into the kind of fantasy ideas of native animals and the kind of Beatrix Potter idea, also the sort of Wind in the Willows, as well as the kind of green and pleasant land idea of the English countryside. So the work is made up of a number of different creatures who take on these different characters, and it exists as a video piece as well as prints, which have this kind of slightly sort of warping psychedelic quality, as well as intentionally having a kind of fairy tale sort of storybook feel to them as well. Finally, I was going to talk a little bit about my most recent work. So this is the work I'm working on at the moment called Mama. This is a series of paintings or digital paintings that I've been working on. So I've got two little girls, one of them's 4 and one of them's 8 months. And interestingly, I think I made the two cute show at Birmingham Museums just before giving birth. And since having children, I have a completely different perspective on cuteness. It's almost like there's an academic perspective and then you have a baby and it becomes this kind of visceral, real lived thing. So I was interested in taking the idea of babies, but also kind of Pooty and Cupid and the kind of babies of art history and bringing them together. This work is in part made with AI technology as well. And I was experimenting a lot, actually, literally whilst I was breastfeeding, with making AI imagery that represented mother and child. And very often what happens is that the mother and the child become kind of fused together, which to me felt like very much a representation of the experience of giving birth and having a child, of the feeling of your individual identity kind of dissolving into another being. So this is a series of works which also deals with the cuteness of babies, but also the kind of cute aesthetic that surrounds motherhood, the sort of baby shower, balloons, ribbons, pinks and blues. And I want there to be a feeling of saccharine kind of initial impression, but beneath that there's something disquieting and unsettling and not quite right. And there's also this sense of almost like the sea and nature kind of pushing through the surface of this almost overlay of the idea of what childbirth and what motherhood should be, or the aesthetic of it, and then the kind of reality of it pushing through. Yeah, so there you go.
Thanks so much, Rachel. Fantastic. And really interesting to see the pieces that are kind of looking at fairy tale as well, because I think we'll come back to that maybe in the Q&A around ideas around childhood and fairy tale, and maybe a little bit of Disney in there as well. Thanks, Rachel. Right, our last speaker today is Claire Catterall, who is the senior curator at Somerset House, London, and was the curator, of course, of the recent Cute exhibit, which ran from January to April of this year. And if you didn't see it, well, I don't know, you have no excuse not to have seen it. It was an absolutely fantastic exhibition, and was really groundbreaking, not only in the way that it brought together over 30 contemporary artists and commissioned new work, but also in the way that it brought together popular culture and commodification and all of that kind of stuff of Cute. It was also record-breaking in the number of visitors that attended the exhibition. It achieved, I think, the highest record of visitor attendance of any Somerset House exhibition. So even more kudos to Claire. So welcoming Claire Catterall. Thanks so much for joining us today. Claire, I think you're muted at the moment.
Sorry, thanks very much for that. I'm just going to share my screen, or yeah, hang on a sec, there we go. Right, can you see that?
Yeah, perfect. We can see your next slide as well at the moment. So we've got it on the user presentation.
Right. How do I get rid of that?
You had it a moment ago.
Yeah, I need to see my notes.
If you'd rather do it this way, I'm sure we'll be able to see the images that you're sharing with us. So not to worry.
Hang on, I'll just see if I can do it differently. Sorry, I'm wasting time.
Just to say to everyone, we probably will be running over by about 5 to 10 minutes, I think, on this session. But we have a break that we can eat into slightly later on.
Right, I'm going to try again.
Great, I can see that.
Can you see my other slide now as well? Or can you just see one?
Yeah, that's fine, I think.
Okay, can you see my notes as well?
We can see your notes.
Oh, never mind. Okay.
But not easily because they're not huge, so that helps.
Okay, well, I will just carry on. So yes, this is going to be a whistle-stop tour through the Cute show, which is going to be quite difficult actually in 10 minutes, and I'll probably go over because it tackled quite a lot of things. I mean, it's important to say that it was primarily an art exhibition, but the artworks in it orbited around phenomenon and objects drawn from popular culture to give it a textural richness. And the reason why we chose an AI cat as the main marketing image was to put across the idea that the exhibition, and indeed cuteness itself, may not be what it immediately appears to be. So it's seductive, but it can also be sinister, uncanny, and downright creepy. But to us, AI's kind of slippery understanding and rendition of cute seemed spookily to encapsulate cute's meaning. And it did cause quite a Twitter or X storm, I should say, because of the use of AI. And people were quite happy to point out that the cat, in fact, had 6 paws. And did we realise that? Which, of course, was the point of it. There were actually 19 AI cat images in all, and all of them were displayed in the entrance to the show. So this slide gives you a view of the ticket desk and the entrance to the show. We've got a few more cats here, all very beautifully framed in blocking frames that emulated the skin of Sylvanian families and the skin tones in soft greys, pinks and beiges. So the first thing you saw when you entered the exhibition was this quote by Tim Berners-Lee, who, when asked to name one use of the internet that he did not anticipate, answered with a single word: kittens. And it was important to us to state that very early on in the show, because the premise of the show very much was that the internet is the incubator of cuteness. It's most definitely cute's 21st century engine. And because cats do rule the internet, the first space of show became one big cat moment, which allowed us to introduce the history of cuteness, as well as the importance of art in explaining its nuances, and all the while riffing off the cat meme. So this was the first thing you saw when you entered the show, the first artwork. And this is by Karen Kalimnik, and it's called The Cat Sitting in Its Favourite Basket Out in the Blizzard in the Himalayas. And what's interesting about this picture, it's one of my favourite pictures in the whole show, is that Kalimnik her art has been generally seen as winsome and willfully kitsch, and generally gets a bad rap amongst art critics. But she draws from her own obsessions and interests, so things like fairy tales and cute animals, and she renders it in this kind of lo-fi fangirl aesthetic. But it's always cut through by a cultural displacement that confers an unsettling present. So she creates a disconnectedness that refuses to take a moralizing or critical stance, and instead revels in this frou-frou radiance that represents a radical moment of cultural sincerity. So for cuteness, it felt like a really important statement to make at the very first stage of the exhibition, in a way. It's almost like a perfect rendition of the meaning of cuteness. And throughout the show, and in this space, you know, there were kind of really lovely design touches. And here is the cat architraving from the designer's AOC that graced the cat moment room. And there is the cat room. You're seeing it walking into it. And the first thing were photographs by Harry Pointer, the Brighton cats. So British Brighton-based photographer Harry Pointer took photographs of his pet cats in anthropomorphic poses that mimicked human activities, such as having tea parties, riding tricycles and roller skating. And then he would add a written caption, turning his photographs into hugely popular and commercially successful novelty greeting cards known as carte de visite. And these very much could be seen as the first cat memes. Likewise, that's my favourite one, with a couple of cats roller skating. And likewise, Louis Wain, who alongside Harry Pointer can be credited with changing popular attitudes towards cats. So very much in the way that Beatrix Potter did for the hedgehog. Here we have Harry Poynter and Louis Wain doing slightly earlier, this is in the 1870s, doing for cats what Beatrix Potter did for hedgehogs slightly later. But here he's presenting them as lovable characters to be kept for companionship rather than as working animals or simply stray pests. And his work was hugely popular and appeared in newspapers, magazines, postcards and books. And it's interesting here, you know, when you think about the internet being Cute's 21st century engine, it's very much mass production that was the 19th century's cuteness engine. Really kind of puts a rocket under cuteness, makes it take off. And there's the wonderful Louis Wain's Ginger Cat. And then Andy Holden, who he's an artist. This is his collection of part of a collection of 300 china cats left to him by his grandmother on her death. And in the accompanying audio voiceover, he unpacks the story of cats and their place in mythology, art, dreams, and the popular imagination, describing their journey from being deified by ancient civilizations to becoming a cutified object. So he also describes how they were, as figurines, searched out, collected and displayed by his grandmother. And he recognises how they gave her a sense of control, but also acted as a balm and a source of unconditional comfort and love. And collectively, they achieve an aura of transcendence, allowing Holden to come to know his grandmother better and ultimately also to grieve for her. I should say at this point that I am really only looking at animals in this presentation, but the exhibition itself obviously had a much broader scope. And it also looked at girlishness, boyishness, and also neither one thing or the otherishness. So I am giving you a very sort of potted history. We also looked at Hello Kitty, big time. And then the first artwork to greet you as you entered the main drag of the exhibition was Mike Kelly's Our Youth. Now, although most of the artwork in the show comes from a generation of artists that grew up with the internet, it felt important to trace their work back to artists like Kelly, who use cuteness very much to talk about their own psyche and subjectivity. So here Kelly assembles a collection of old and tatty junk shop cuddly animals and blows them up to appear monstrous to create a fractured fairy tale of youth that took aim at the idea of childhood as a state of purity and innocence. Likewise, Nayland Blake's The Little One, which was a porcelain doll dressed in a white bunny suit, a figure which represents Blake, who is non-binary and pansexual of mixed race heritage. So they have used rabbit imagery prominently throughout their career to address issues of race, sexuality, and gender. So Blake's bunny suit is informed by the practices initiated by subcultural communities, such as kinky play and furry fandom. And he uses this to question the boundaries of identity, both from within and without the category of human. And then we come onto the part of the gallery that I called the menagerie, which was basically 3 arches with animal artworks in them. And this one is Cosima von Bonin's Killer Whale with Long Eyelashes. So here we see a killer whale slumped, exhausted against a chair, prompting us to ask what toll late capitalism has taken on his life, dressing it up in its consumerist fantasies and binding it within its anthropomorphic daydreams. Much of her work, von Bonin tackles the issues of environmental destruction, reminding us of our responsibility to the animal kingdom. But she likes to warn us too that while nature indulges us, its patience might soon wear thin. And interestingly, Miranda might like to know that Cosima also looks at clams in her work and features other crustacea like oysters and lobsters, and she's got an obsession with sea creatures, and I think there's a wonderful octopus work as well. Jean-Pierre Lyon's gargoyle is a creature in the tradition of fantastical stone grotesques. But Lyon's is a Black transgender woman with mixed heritage. Much of her work draws from cartoon animation and points to its historical roots in minstrelsy and its descent from racial caricature. So Lyon's, she's created these series of 9 gods that are created to protect the world. So they're autonomous and complex beings, both violent and menacing, but also adorably cute. So in her practice, the grotesque and the cute are often brought together and then pulled to extremes. So like a double-edged sword, the horror is counterbalanced with positivity and whimsy. The final piece in the menagerie is Isaac Lithgow's Bambi. And this piece was titled When Everything is New, the Pleasures are Skin Deep. So here Lithgow conflates his interest in storytelling, science fiction, and the modern industrial complex. And this figure of Bambi is an avatar from the future caught in the maelstrom of the present. So balanced on a kind of techno-disco flower, this Bambi's pose is reminiscent of Disney's skating Bambi on ice. So this reminds us of a creature of myth and legend, but here he appears part alien, reminding us that we are bound up in a tension between the natural and artificial worlds. There are other animal works in the exhibition, but I'll run through them quickly because I wanted to get on to Juliana Huxtable. So they're not self-portraits, but they're rather portrayals of selfhood, where Juliana depicts herself with lizard eyes, pig snout, and cow udder, probing deeply into ideas of identity and hybridity. So Huxtable is a Black transgender woman who was born intersex, and she often describes her self-objectification as cute with a K, which is a colloquial term for the word cute among queer people of colour. So the addition of button badges on the work, which you can see here, adds a political dimension, tapping into the language of protest culture in a playful dig at discourse surrounding much same-sex and animal rights rhetoric. Alaka Schilling's Buggy Bear, and the wonderful work by Rachel Maclean, which she's talked about so eloquently. The final artwork in the show was Mark Leckie's Dazzle Dark. So here Leckie tells the story of 2 companions, a carousel horse and a plushy rainbow unicorn, who go on a delirious fairground ride that is once exhilarating and darkly menacing, intoxicating yet curiously hollow. So after the fair has ended, the companions find themselves alone on the beach in the luminous glow of a pastel twilight, marvelling at a gold balloon star. The moment feels portentous. As the promise and thrill of pure pleasure fades, all that is left is the feeling of time inevitably moving inexplorably forward. So this film felt apt as an ending for the show, especially in its ambiguity, which seems above all else to reflect cuteness, which seems to be on an increasingly accelerated path. But what is cute's vanishing point? Where will it lead us? So the exhibition made the case that while cute is undeniably the most prominent aesthetic in our times, it remains difficult to pin down. Cute's queasy proximity to the values and systems of capitalism make us view it with deep suspicion. But in our rapidly changing and uncertain times, cute's indeterminate and sometimes paradoxical nature feel more transformative, powerful, and hopeful than ever. In an imperfect world, Cute's ambiguity and perversity are the very qualities that allow it to imagine different futures. By unlocking entrenched binaries and rigid realities and allowing a bit of magical rethinking, it may help us make sense of ourselves in this post-truth, post-reality world, and help us to find a path to a kinder, more fallible way of being.
Thank you so much, Claire. Wonderful.